A turnover-free game and increased use of no huddle hold the key to victory for the Atlanta Falcons entering Week 10.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. So, guys, if you do not know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, been covering the Falcons for so long, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP, formerly on Twitter at FalcFans, RIP, but still going strong on this illustrious podcast. And want to give a special shout out to the everydayers out there that tune in each and every day and make this podcast their first listen or first watch. And all those folks that do that, appreciate you. And if you want to join the everydayers, make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's episode, I will let you know up front that we'll probably get a little ranty towards the end of the episode, but we'll talk a little bit more about, Bijan's usage and why that's, still a narrative, but, is overblown. Got more thoughts, some stats and data that you haven't seen this week that suggest that Bijan's usage is mostly a much ado about nothing. But let's start off talking keys to victory. And you may notice that, hey, where's Jarvis Davis? Jarvis is busy today, so I have to hold down the fort, and I will sort of step into the shoes and try to do my best Jarvis impression. Although you can't do too much justice to that. Jarvis is his own man. But let's talk keys to victory for the Falcons. And I have two keys, right? I think the Falcons need to play clean in this game, and I think they need to get their 2-minute and or 4-minute offense going, especially in the second quarter of this game. Now, let's talk about their ability to play clean, right? As I've mentioned before on yesterday's Locked On Cardinals crossover with Alex Clancy, Arizona's a scrappy team, and I think this the potential for them to get Kyler Murray and James Conner back is going to make this team much better than what their initial record indicates. That I think a lot of people are going to look at this team, oh, they're 1-8, but I think the potential boost that Murray and Conner can give them is going to make this team look more like a 4-5 team. That if they had those guys healthy all season long, I think that's probably closer to what they would be based off of how everybody else has performed for this team. And so this is a much more even matchup than I think the records seem to indicate, assuming we get, some semblance of what Kyler Murray has been in the past, which is, a borderline top 10 quarterback. And James Conner has been a very productive player this year. Now, what's been interesting about Arizona these last couple of weeks, especially, is, as I mentioned yesterday, like they don't have a particularly big margin for error given some of their deficiencies. And again, Murray and Conner, I think, potentially make this less of an issue moving forward. But they've turned the ball over a bunch the last couple of weeks, and both Baltimore and Cleveland combined for 28 points off of those 5 turnovers over the past 2 games. And if you take those points away, if Arizona had played a clean game in those games, they potentially beat the Ravens 24-17 if you take away the 14 points off of turnovers. And, they still probably lose to the Browns 13-0, but that's a very competitive game going into the final moments. And we've talked throughout the last couple of weeks about how turnovers have killed the Falcons, and turnovers were a turning point in this last week's game against the Minnesota Vikings. Again, all the attention is on Bijan Robinson's workload or lack thereof, but what people don't seem to be talking about is the Falcons were up 21-13 with a potential chance to extend that lead, and then Bijan Robinson fumbled the ball. And then they come back and Taylor Heineke throws a pick, and Minnesota scores 10 points off of those turnovers. And not only do you have a 10-point swing, but assuming the Falcons would have scored on either one of those possessions, a field goal or not, you're talking about a 13 or 17-point swing. And even if the Falcons don't score and they just simply possess the ball for their typical 2+ minutes, that time is 2 minutes taken off of the end of game clock. That is exactly the 2 minutes that the Vikings have to march down the field and get the game winning score. So to me, turnovers are going to be key. They have been key for this Falcon team, and it's a big reason why this team has struggled so much as of late. And if they play clean, turnover free, get back to being a disciplined team, and don't give Arizona any chances to, score points off. Because again, both of these teams have such a thin margin for error that, the Falcons giving the ball away or taking the ball away is probably going to be what decides this football game. Now, the second key is the Falcons 2-minute and or 4-minute offense. They need to get that going. We've seen this Falcons offense in recent games get off to some good starts in the first quarter, but they've struggled to sustain that going into the second quarter. And part of that, I think, is they have struggled to score in those critical moments in the 2-minute drill, in the 4-minute drill, in the final minutes of the second quarter. They've only scored twice in those final 5 minutes of the second quarter. That was the Green Bay game, the Washington game. That's one of the lowest scoring rates in the NFL. I believe it's the second, tied for second worst in the NFL this season. And we saw this team against the Titans, and this wasn't in the 4-minute or 2-minute drill, but with 9 minutes to go in the second quarter, we saw them go no huddle. Right. And it seemed like that was the thing that kind of jump started this offense, and the Falcons started to move the ball against the Titans. And then, of course, Desmond Ridder fumbled that opportunity away. But I would like to see the Falcons integrate more of that. That was something that the Falcons did from time to time with Marcus Mariota last year, and it seemed to jumpstart the offense at times. They haven't really done that this season outside of that Titans game of getting the no-huddle going outside of 2-minute offense in the second quarter, outside of 2-minute offense in the fourth quarter. And so that's something that I've seen this Falcons team not only under Arthur Smith with Mariota, but also if you go back to the early years of Matt Ryan, that was seemingly their formula under Mike Mularkey, where it felt like, the first quarter was typically the first 15 plays that were scripted in the game. And if the Falcons needed that sort of adrenaline shot, that jump start to the offense in the second quarter, whether it was the beginning of the second quarter, midway through the second quarter, you would often see them go no huddle. And that would be the thing that would spark that team to get their halftime lead that they would eventually blow in the third quarter, that then would lead to them getting that fourth quarter comeback and game-winning drive finished by a Matt Bryant sort of game-winning field goal. And, we got the kicker that can do that. Who knows if we have the quarterback? And that, to me, is going to be the big question for this team. Can Taylor Heinicke be capable of doing that this week against Arizona? If you look at the film from Minnesota with him specifically in the 2-minute at the end of the first half and at the end of the game, he missed a lot of opportunities and made some very questionable decisions in those crunch time situations. So I would love to come here on the podcast, the postcast with Jarvis Davis on Sunday, as well as Tenitra Batiste, and talk about how clutch Taylor Heinicke was, right? But it's fascinating to me that so much of the conversation surrounding the Atlanta Falcons is about Bijan Robinson's workload. Is making national headlines. And, I get why the national people talk about it, but no one is talking about how Taylor Heinicke had an opportunity to potentially set up the game-tying field goal for Younghoe Koo if he had just made a throw in that final minute of the game, that would have potentially set that up, and he just missed the throw and nearly threw a pick on that play. But of course, everybody has to be butthurt about Bijan's workload, but we'll talk more about Bijan's workload coming up on the podcast. But to wrap up about this Arizona Cardinals game, I do expect the Falcons defense to play, and I think this game is going to boil down to what we see from this offense, right? I think the defense is going to keep it close, keep it competitive. It's going to give the offense plenty of opportunities, as we have seen consistently throughout this season, and the offense just needs to take advantage of those by playing clean, not giving those opportunities back to the Arizona Cardinals. And of course, in key moments in this game, especially in the 2-minute drill, in the 4-minute drill, going into halftime, if they can get some points, that's going to put more pressure on Arizona and hopefully give the Falcons some of that momentum, and hopefully they won't cough it up like they did this past week. But speaking of coughing it up, we are going to talk about Bijan's workload, and I'm going to give you some stats that no one's talking about. Everybody's talking about how many carries he's getting, but no one's really talking about some stats that really illustrate that Bijan's getting a lion's share of the workload, but those fumbles probably had a bigger impact on some of his lack of touches that you may see. And we'll get into that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. But first, guys, I want to tell you about Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And now that basketball season is here, Prize Picks has a special slate where you can combine projections across multiple sports. For example, you can combine LeBron James and Travis Kelce on 3 points made and receptions. It's all part of Prize Picks, where you have the skills. You can turn $10 into $250 in just a few taps. Prize Picks is simple. You just pick 2 or more players, pick more or less on the projected stats, and the more entries you make, the more money you can win, up to 25 times your money. There's quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types that make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code, all in lowercase, LockedOnNFL for that deposit match. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Now, whether you're on extended travel, bracing for major weather events, or limited by yet another supply chain shortage, you are covered, my friend, thanks to our partners over at Jace Medical that are giving you life-saving antibiotics and a long list of daily medications that can be ordered up to a year supply, right? And you can even get ED generics like Cialis and Viagra. Go online right now at jacemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply of your daily medications. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount. Don't get caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. And if you or someone you love would get some peace of mind with a year-long supply of any daily medication, go to jacemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for $20 off your purchase. Use code LOCKEDON at checkout at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, promo code LOCKEDON. So continuing today's episode, I do want to plug where you can check out Jarvis on the Locked On NFL kickoff each and every Friday at 2 p.m. So if you missed Jarvis on today's Locked On Falcons, check him out across the entire Locked On NFL network. If you're subscribed to Locked On Falcons, you're subscribed to that show Friday at 2 p.m. He and others are going to be previewing this upcoming weekend slate of games. So check out Locked On NFL Kickoff Live at 2 p.m. Friday Eastern on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. So let's talk about Bijan's usage. And I want to say up front, I am all in favor of Bijan getting more work. But I think this storyline of Bijan's lack of work has been much overblown. You've probably seen the stat out there that so many people have been throwing out there of looking at Bijan's workload inside the 5, right? Where he only has 1 carry inside the 5. Tyler Algier has 6. Kadero Hodge has 1. Jonnu Smith has 1. And you probably look at that and you say, okay, if we take 2 away from Tyler Algier and give those to Bijan, you have now a 4-3 split instead of a 6-1 split. And then you say, hey, well, why are we giving Jonnu those carries? Why are we giving Kadero Hodge those opportunities? Those are Bijan. So again, at the end of the day, we're really talking about 2 to 4 touches that we're complaining about with Bijan at the end of the day, which I don't think is as big a deal as people make it out to be. And again, it goes back to something I just mentioned on the pod, where like I feel like a bigger issue in this Falcons game was the 2 turnovers that they had. But I think I guess we're just numb to the turnovers and like, oh, Bijan fumbles the football and Taylor Heineke throws a terrible interception and nearly had 3 other interceptions in this game that were terrible throws and terrible decisions. And we're just like, yep, that's fine. But hey, let's get Bijan 2 more carries at the goal line. And suddenly, the world changes. So that's what's kind of weird to me about this. But there's a couple of stats I want to throw at you that you're not necessarily seeing that I think probably illustrate that Bijan's workload is not as lacking as people would lead you to believe. And I think the fact that Bijan fumbled that football in this game probably had more to do with some of his lack of touches that, again, is being ignored in this game. So I'm curious, how many of you people, and this is a rhetorical question, how many people know how many snaps Bijan had up until his fumble? His fumble was his 31st snap of the game. Now, how many snaps did Tyler Algier have up to that point in the game? 12. So Bijan's getting 2.5 times as many snaps up to that point in the game as Tyler Algier. How many opportunities did Bijan have to touch the ball? And opportunities, we're just looking at carries plus targets up to that point in the game. That fumble carry was Bijan's 11th opportunity, compared to Tyler Algier up to that point had 4. So again, almost 3 times as many opportunities to touch the football up to that point in the fumble. Now, with Bijan, how many of those opportunities were actually successful plays based off of down and distance and how many yards he got? 1. How many for Tyler Algier of his 4 opportunities? 1. So Bijan got 7 more opportunities and had 0 successes on those 7 opportunities. Again, that doesn't get a lot of attention. That everybody's talking about how little Bijan gets used, but no one's talking about how ineffective Bijan was throughout this game. So After Bijan fumbles the football, how many snaps does Bijan get? 11 for the rest of the game. How many does he get? How many does Tyler Algier get? 12. So you go from basically a 5-2 split in terms of snaps with Bijan to Tyler Algier to a 1-to-1 split in terms of snaps. They split snaps. Now, how many opportunities after that fumble did Bijan get? 4. Tyler Algier got 8. So again, Tyler Algier got the lion's share of the opportunities. And part of that, I think, is owed to Tyler Algier being pretty productive. Right now, how many of those 4 touches opportunities is successful for Bijan? 2. So 50% success rate on his opportunities after that fumble. What was Algier's success rate on his 8 opportunities? 50%. He get 4 successes on those 8 opportunities. So there was no drop off from Tyler Algier from Bijan after that fumble. Not to mention the fumble, I think, matters because, again, I may be forgetting a fumble that Tyler Algier had in his rookie season, but as far as I know, he has 0 fumbles on 350 career touches, right? When we look at carries and catches, 0. Bijan on 130 has 2 officially in the stat book, but that doesn't count a 3rd fumble that he had in the season opener against Carolina that was nullified by a penalty, that was wiped off the stat sheets because of a holding call. I think it was on Chris Lindstrom. So Bijan's in reality fumbled 3 times in 100. So he's fumbled roughly once every 40 carries. Tyler Algier has 0 fumbles as far as I'm aware of. Maybe there was another fumble that he had as a rookie that was nullified by a penalty that I'm forgetting about. But, that's like 8 times as, you do the math, 350 carries, 0 fumbles, like 350 carries, right, to 40. That's like 8 times. Basically, Bijan is 8 times more likely to fumble the football based off of his limited sample size versus Tyler Algier's limited sample size, right? And so, it makes sense to me why Arthur Smith, because of ball security, especially late in the game, was like, Tyler Algier is being productive, just as productive as Bijan Robinson is. And also with the game on the line in the 4th quarter, I need to trust my guy to be able to make a play and not give the ball back to the opposing team. So I don't have a problem with Arthur Smith's decision to give Tyler Algier the football in more goal-to-go situations late in that game, in the red zone and all that stuff. I think it's very understandable. But yet we're sitting here wanting to fire the coach because Bijan doesn't get 2 to 4 more touches inside the 5-yard line. And we're sitting here acting like that's a fireable offense. But meanwhile, we're not talking about the decision to switch from Desmond Ridder to Taylor Heinicke, which to me is much more of a controversial choice that Arthur Smith has made, right? That he potentially derailed the long-term future of this football team, which may or may not have been attached to Desmond Ridder's success for short-term game, which is understandable, but you didn't really see that play out for the Falcons against the Vikings because Taylor Heinicke was terrible in that game. I don't know how else to say it. It's as bad a game as Marcus Mariota's Carolina game or Desmond Ridder's London game when you watch the film, guys. And again, I know the box score may tell a different story, but that's how bad the film is. That's why you got to watch the film. And if you don't get that short-term game, if you don't have the Falcons win this week against Arizona and get better performance from Taylor Heinicke, there's going to be hell to pay. There's going to be consequences. That's going to be something that we're going to sit here and say, yeah, Arthur Smith really screwed the pooch on that decision, more so than not giving Bijan the football in a 2nd and goal play or whatever it is that people are complaining about. And part of the reason why I'm not sitting here fire and brimstone about it, because I'm hoping it works out in Arthur Smith's case, that I'm hoping that the Falcons go out there and beat Arizona this week and then come out of their bye week and beat New Orleans. And if they do that, they are in firm control of their destiny for the remainder of the season. They are in firm control of being a playoff team after that point. Now, with 6 games left, we know the Falcons can certainly falcon, but if they get 2 more wins over these next 3 weeks, they're back in business, baby. And so I would love to sit here, as I said earlier, to come on this podcast on a postcast or a rapid reaction on Sunday and eat crow and be like, Taylor Heinicke, despite laying a rotten egg on this past Sunday against the Vikings, came out and balled against the Arizona Cardinals. And Arthur Smith, you, sir, have redeemed yourself, right? And hopefully that happens. And if it doesn't happen, there's going to be consequences to Arthur Smith. There's not going to be consequences to me because, I'm going to sit here, whether it's Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heinicke, or whoever is the quarterback and or coach when it comes to Arthur Smith and his future. I'm gonna still be here getting these checks, guys, talking about the Atlanta Falcons on a daily basis. So I'm not gonna be too butthurt about it. But I don't sit here and resent Arthur Smith because I think he's doing what he thinks is best. And even if I don't agree with what he thinks is best, you know, not not my decision. And so I don't resent it if he makes the wrong choice, whatever that winds up being. But that leads us into a conversation about resenting these things because it's going to lead to a listener question that is related to Bijan's workload. And it's going to lead to me ranting a little bit about why people need to let go of their resentment. And we'll do that to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp, and there's no better time for BetterHelp to be sponsoring this episode because of what I'm going to talk about later on the episode. But it's a great time for you guys to check out BetterHelp because this time of year can be a lot. Whether you're feeling sadness, anxiety, therapy can be your bright spot amid all the stress, all the change, and something to look forward to make you feel grounded and give you the tools to manage everything going on. And BetterHelp has helped me. It can help you. You can get matched with a licensed therapist. If you're thinking of starting therapy, please give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's more affordable than traditional offline therapy. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. You can get matched with a licensed therapist quickly, fill out a brief questionnaire, and then if you don't mesh with your therapist, you can switch at any time for no additional charge. So find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp by visiting betterhelp.com/lockedon today, and you'll get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So we have a listener question from the Discord from Seattle6, and he asks, explain to me how we can get away with not playing our greatest offensive threat on key downs. Follow up, this isn't a new thing. We've been wondering where our star players are on key downs all throughout the Arthur Smith era. And in the Discord, he attached a screenshot of Field Yates's tweet from Sunday, and I'll attach that for you guys to watch on your screen. And Field Yates tweeted, the Falcons just forced a fumble and returned it to the Vikings 1 yard line. The subsequent plays was a 1st and goal false start, a 1st and goal pass to Jonnu Smith, a 2nd and goal end around to Jonnu Smith, a 3rd and goal handoff to Tyler Algier. Bijan Robinson was off the field forever. Snap, sick every snap. So, yes, that is almost a true statement by Field Yates. Actually, Bijan Robinson was on the field for the 1st and goal pass to Jonnu Smith. But of course, fantasy folks won't let facts and evidence discourage them from pushing certain narratives. So, Seattle6, you sent this on Sunday, and it's related to something that I want to talk about on this podcast to wrap up today's episode. Something that I've been holding in for a long time that I've wanted to rant about, where people need to let stuff go. Like, I was upset on that 2nd and goal play call to Jonnu Smith, the jet sweep to Jonnu Smith on Sunday. I let it go. And yet, we're Thursday where I'm recording this, Friday, as many of you guys are listening to this. And if you're still upset about one play call, and, again, you can still think Bijan should have gotten the ball on 3rd and goal, but I hopefully what we just talked about illustrated why you don't think that's a big deal that Algier got that opportunity, given he's a little bit more trustworthy with the ball. And, again, ball security has been such a problem that I don't think enough people are appreciating that. And again, that's not to dump on Bijan or anything like that. It's just like, there are consequences to coughing the ball up. Desmond Ridder can tell you. But, I sit here like, I hope people are not still mad. It's Thursday, it's Friday, whatever, about stuff that happens on Sunday. And it's weird to me. Like, okay, weird is not the right word. I shouldn't be so judgmental in my words. Fascinating. Let's use that. That's a better word. Less judgmental. That, I get upset about these plays on Sunday, but by Monday I'm good, right? I'm moved on. And, I don't let one bad play affect me in the lingering resentment that people have for days, weeks, months, and years. When it comes to, one bad play or one bad game, is fascinating to me that people hang on to this resentment. And that's why, like, I sit here and, like, BetterHelp is a great opportunity, guys, because you shouldn't be letting football affect you to that degree where you're hanging on to this resentment for years and years and years, right? And I'll use an analogy to get my point across, and hopefully it works for you guys. But let's imagine a world where I'm the host of the Locked On Jennifer Lawrence podcast. I'm the world's biggest Jennifer Lawrence fan, right? And I sit here and it's on a Locked On Lawrence podcast. It's No Hard Feelings November because it's on Netflix, and we're sitting here talking about how No Hard Feelings is the greatest comedy of 2023, and the Academy Awards should create a new category for best comedy so that Jennifer Lawrence, our beloved J-Law, can get another Oscar nominee so that she can go well on her path to being this generation's Meryl Streep of constantly getting nominated, 4-time Academy Award nominee, 1-time Academy Award winner, Jennifer Lawrence. Of course, No Hard Feelings. Go watch it if you haven't. And right. And I sit here and I go constantly about J-Law is this and J-Law is that, all that stuff and more. And there was a movie that came out almost about 7 years ago in 2016 called Passengers, starring Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt. Now, Chris Pratt, there's no spoiler for Passengers, but Chris Pratt is the main character in the movie. But I think a lot of people that saw the movie, myself included, as the world's biggest J-Law stan out there as a host of Locked On Lawrence, thinks that movie would be better if it was told from Jennifer Lawrence's perspective rather than Chris Pratt's perspective. And me, being the biggest J-Law stan in the world, feels a resentment towards Chris Pratt because he ruined Jennifer Lawrence's chance to get another Oscar nomination from that movie, where if it was about her, she would have been acting her butt off and it would have been wonderful and all these various things. And ever since then, I've had a bug up my butt about Chris Pratt. I hate all his movies. I don't see any of his movies. The one Chris Pratt movie I saw, spoiler alert for Avengers Infinity War, he caused half of the galaxy to lose their life because of stupid choices. He's the biggest doofus on the planet. Super Mario, trash. Jurassic World, trash. Tomorrow War, trash. All of it's trash because Chris Pratt had the audacity to, ruin that Passengers movie by being the main character. Now, I say all that as a ridiculous analogy, right? If you're guys following, and if you're not following, Jennifer Lawrence is the Atlanta Falcons. Chris Pratt is whoever you have lingering resentment to: Dan Quinn, Arthur Smith, Devontae Freeman, Jake Matthews, Keanu Neal, whoever, right? That you still hold on. And I use the movie Passengers because it happened roughly 7 years ago. And roughly 7 years ago, the Falcons played a football game that I'm sure plenty of people still have lingering resentment for. But I sit here, guys, and I go, it would be ridiculous for me as the host of Locked On Lawrence that every time Chris Pratt, posts on Instagram, I sit there and I write a comment: "You ruined Passengers. You're garbage. You're a terrible person, blah, 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 blah," all the time. If I was a real person, I'm sure, out of the 7+ billion people on the planet, there's one person out there that I just basically described, but you would probably look at that person a little weird. And it's fascinating to me that, like, sports fandom, you're allowed to think and act this way when it comes to resentment for these players and these coaches, that all they did was try their best and it wasn't good enough. But we can sit here years later and be like, that one play. And the reason I bring this up, because again, that 1 second and goal play, they did a jet sweep to Jonnu Smith. We hated it in the moment, but then you just kind of let it go. Like, you can go and watch Super Mario Brothers. You can watch Onward. You can watch your Chris Pratt movies and be like, whatever you think about Chris Pratt, you don't need to hold this lingering resentment for these players, these coaches, these play calls forever and ever. And I just feel like, guys, this is where BetterHelp can help. And I know some of you guys are like, Aaron, I don't come here for you to get on your soapbox about, feelings and all this stuff. But I just think, like, especially because we're men and we are trained to socialize and all this stuff to hold on to our feelings, we just take it for granted that, like, we're supposed to feel this way about our favorite sports teams. And it's just fascinating to me that this behavior would not fly in any other capacity. You'd be like, that's bizarre to behave that way, to feel, to hate on Keanu Neal because he need a football. And you can think of the other 50 great plays that Keanu Neal made. That's a choice that you make, right? That you can remember him by, but you choose to remember that one play because you prefer to hang on to resentment. So again, I say, give BetterHelp a try, because I got the feeling that some of these feelings of resentment toward the Atlanta Falcons are really you sort of projecting other issues. But again, I'm not a licensed therapist. please try BetterHelp. Go to betterhelp.com/lockedon. Maybe a licensed therapist will be able to help you out. But I just wanted to get that off my chest to wrap up today's episode. Please continue to make us your first listen. I promise I won't be going on too many of these rants in the future going forward, but that's going to do it for us, guys. Appreciate it. Till then, have a great weekend. Please.